In this video, we're taking a look at a local racing legend here in East Tennessee and his 55 Chevrolet called the Branded Rat. Even though this car has all the ingredients for a modern drag car, it has a ton of history dating back to the 1970s and 80s. Don Cox is the guy who built and owned this car for all these years. He was from the Knoxville, Tennessee area, and he built this thing pretty much from the ground up, and he said this was actually his second car and he only paid $125 for it. And through the years, obviously, he spent a lot more money investing in making this car quicker and faster, and then that turned into an obsession with bracket racing that led him to lots of race wins, lots of rounds, and lots of passes inside of this car. So tons of history dating back to just when this thing was a street car. And we'll see a picture right here at 411 Dragway in Seymour, Tennessee, when this car was running, just as pretty much on the edge of a street car and a drag car. You can see it's got some hand lettering on it. You can see the wheel wells have been opened up a little bit. It's got slicks on the back. So you'll see the evolution of this car from the white paint job to a fresh new maroon paint job with new Super Trick wheels, a big Pro Stock style hood scoop. He's really made big changes on this car. Don had a local painter, Hoarder, do all the hand lettering and artwork on this thing, giving it the identity that it had for all these years. Then big changes started happening with the suspension. You'll notice that between these two pictures, both taken at Crossville Drag Strip in Crossville, Tennessee, one picture has got a wide rear end with the back tires sticking out, and the next picture it's got a narrowed rear end, and you can see the stance is a little bit lower. So year by year, he kept making changes to this car, kept getting quicker, kept figuring this thing out. And it won a lot of races. And you'll see in this clipping from IHRA Drag Review magazine, 1990 he won at Bristol. And that's pretty much everybody's big goal, is to go win at Bristol. And he did just that multiple times in this car's career. Through the years, a lot of things changed on this car, but you'll see that the paint job remained. Even though there's a tube chassis that was built for it and this car was sitting really low now, it still had the old school paint job, still had the radiused wheel wells out back, still had the old school fiberglass front end on it. He really cared about keeping the history of this car alive. Don took really good care of his race car, and this paint job survived lots of years until a very unfortunate accident happened at Huntsville Dragway just a few years ago, where this car flipped upside down and destroyed that original body. So he took it back home, disassembled it, put a new body on the car, all new everything. It was his chance to really go over this car and make it fresh and new again. After Don rebuilt the car after the crash, he actually ran it in black primer for a few races, but then went back with the original maroon color, and he even had Howard Horn go back and redo all of the original lettering and artwork to make it look just like it did before the crash. A super clean car, inside and out. This thing was absolutely immaculate. And you could expect to see him be very competitive, whether it was the old setup or this new setup. This car would go rounds. And that's because Don was a very seasoned racer. He was excellent at bracket racing. He knew his car. It was just a really great combination. I was fortunate to become friends with Don on Facebook, and then I got to meet him at Brainerd Motorsports Park at a big bracket race. And we talked about the history of the car, and he told me a little bit more about the rebuild a few years ago. And it became so clear that he cared a lot about the history of this car. Otherwise, he would have painted it differently. He would have treated the body a little differently, but you'll see that this car is absolutely paying tribute to those early days. And unfortunately, just a few months after meeting him, Don passed away suddenly. He was at the drag strip at his home track of Knoxville Dragway, just doing what he loved. And he passed away without any warning. It was a really big shock to his family and his racing family. People that have spent decades hanging out with Don and racing against Don. it was just a big shock to the whole racing community in East Tennessee. Knoxville Dragway held a memorial service for Don where hundreds of people gathered to pay tribute to this local racing legend. It's really tough to lose a guy like Don, and even though I didn't know him all that well, I could tell by everybody's reaction, just how much he was loved by the drag racing community and his family. An unfortunate situation that he passed away so suddenly, but it's also really cool to see that he got to spend decades doing what he loved with a car that he loved. And even though he crashed it and rebuilt it, and even though it had many updates and evolutions through the years, this car still has that history dating back to the 70s and 80s, and it's paying tribute to Don's dedication to drag racing and his desire to go out there and win.